Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Politics with Roger. I'm Roger, and we like to talk about politics here. It is Friday, September 22nd. We're going to discuss the important stories of the week and analyze them just a little bit. So we'll dive right in. Just recapping from last week, the big stories of last week was basically Hurricane Irma. And last week was a narrative-driven week, and I would say also this week in the news was a narrative-driven week. Not really any stories dominating the news cycle. Obviously, many events happening, many different stories, but nothing dominating the news cycle. So a very narrative-driven week. Last week we had the hurricanes, or Hurricane Irma, after Hurricane Harvey in Houston. Responses seemed pretty good. There was a lot of damage in those hurricanes, so continue to pray for people in Florida and Texas. Florida and Texas, and everyone affected in between. Also, in the week, we're not going to touch too much on natural disasters, but there was a huge earthquake in Mexico City, 7.1, causing lots of death and damage. Also, in and among a lot of natural disasters around the world in this stretch, this summer turning to fall season, August and September. But anyway, so diving into the news of this week. Last week, September 16th, Saturday, a riot broke out in St. Louis, or I shouldn't say a riot broke out. A riot was orchestrated after the acquittal of former officer Jason Stockley. Black Lives Matter reemerged. We haven't seen them in a while. We didn't see them during the hurricanes when there was actually people, including black people, suffering. But they did reemerge for the acquittal of Jason Stockley. And putting the case aside, the reason we're pointing it out, well, let me back up just a step. First of all, it's a good thing that the riots seem to go away pretty quickly. I mean, a U2 concert was canceled. The mayor's house was menaced with protesters, but things seem to de-escalate pretty quickly. The police did make arrests and put an end to all the agitation in St. Louis. So that was a good thing. I bring up this story, and I think it's a big story, not only because it was the first story of the week, but it's the connection between Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and what I would call what's really paid communist agitators at this point to basically destabilize the peace and harmony of our nation. And that's a tactic used by leftists to create chaos so that a new power would have to come in and clean up the mess that is made. So in this case, with Black Lives Matter and Antifa, you see Black Lives Matter reemerge after after an acquittal of what they presume would be an unpopular decision, and then putting that aside, putting the actual case aside. You see them try to destabilize the area, and it underscores the intention when they fail to hype up the event. In this case, the acquittal of Jason Stockley. They failed to hype it up to. They failed to hype it up to a point to where they could get a lot of support and people on the street causing damage. And it kind of exposes the fact that it's all orchestrated anyway. But so that was Saturday. Another part about this story is the way that police respond to these agitations, riots, to these events. The police have been accused in certain events in Berkeley, in Ferguson, in Charlottesville, and other places around the country of standing down during certain either riots or other kind of even orchestrated events, not spontaneous riots, but events that were planned, political events. And police have been accused of standing down. And the reason I bring this up, clearly the police in St. Louis on September 16th were on top of the situation. People were allowed to express their First Amendment rights, but beyond some looting and some vandalism, the police were able to get control of the situation fairly quickly. In other recent years, or in recent years, like in Ferguson, and again mentioning Charlottesville and Berkeley, and I think of other examples. I encourage you to look at other examples. Police being accused of stand down, and this piggybacks, or this The reason this is happening is because of the Strong Cities Initiative, or there's this power struggle for federal control of local police. And in 2016, I have to double check, the Strong Cities Initiative, uh, uh, put out by Loretta Lynch's Justice Department, basically tried to federalize police across the country, which is anyway. We won't get into the how it's unconstitutional, why it's a bad idea, and all this other stuff. But this has created this power struggle, and it's also created these situations where police seem to be standing down in certain cities at certain times for certain political purposes. So I wanted to bring that up. Black Lives Matter had a protest on Saturday. It was a disaster for them. I guess that not enough people were angry at the acquittal, and the police arrested criminals or people who were criminally vandalizing or destroying property. So anyway, there was that. Moving on, the big news of the week was the president's speech at the United Nations. Donald Trump did what we elected him to do. He went to the belly of the beast, in this case the UN, the home of globalism. I mean, that is the UN's charter. An organization, a very powerful organization at this point now, that doesn't believe in borders, doesn't believe in sovereignty, doesn't believe in nationalism. Donald Trump went to the United Nations and gave a full frontal, fervent attack of promotion of nationalism, and basically denounced globalism. And that's pretty incredible. I mean, that was a great thing. In that speech, he made strong indictments on socialism and collectivism, and cited Venezuela and the collapsing Venezuelan country government situation that has been created because of socialism. Hugo Chavez's brand of socialism, now Nicolas Maduro, in Venezuela. So, but anyway, a tremendous speech by Donald Trump promoting nationalism, and not just American nationalism and putting America first, but encouraging nations across the world to put their people first and their countries first before the affairs of the United Nations. And it was an incredible defense of nationalism, of sovereignty, and that leads to free market freedoms and liberties when power is decentralized. And it's good that borders stay. So anyway, Donald Trump delivering at the UN speech, a huge speech. Check that one out. It's all over anywhere on the internet that you want to look.